Alex Fox. I'm the Executive Director of the Swedish Historical Society, home of the Erlander home behind me and the Nordic Cultural Center. Today we are on our third part series of the Fika with the Swede, and we are so incredibly excited to have Cecilia Widegren here with the Swedish Parliament, as well as our honored other guests and attendees. We have Linnea Bengtsson, our Swedish Ambassador, Emma Cornin, who is our partner with our lead shipping with the City of Rockford and our international partnership, along with many faces that I'm quite familiar with in our Swedish Historical Society membership and more. So thank you so much all for joining us. And I'm going to give Emma just a chance to introduce herself and a little bit about the partnership between Sweden and Rockford for those of you who are not already familiar. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Cornin, and I work with the partnership between Rockford and Lidköping and Skaraborg. I'm very happy to be here. I took over the job after Linnea last year in February, so I've been working a bit more than a year now, and I'm very happy to be here. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from Cecilia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. And for those of you who are not already familiar, we have our Swedish Ambassador, Linnea Bengtsson, formerly here with us in Rockford and now in Sweden. Hopefully someday we can get her back here in Rockford, just as many of you would love to see all of them here attend. And so we are excited to have her here, and she will act as our moderator today. So if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to first and foremost send them in the chat box. You will find the ability to chat depending on what device you have, either at the bottom of your screen or at the top, I believe, right-hand corner. You can hover over, click chat, and then it will type the message out to everyone. We'll be able to read them and have Cecilia answer them. Otherwise, perhaps, we may have an open question and answer session at the very end, depending on time. So I will pass it over to Linnea, and we will begin our meeting. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for being on this Fika with us. It's so nice to see everyone here. And it seems like maybe everyone figured out the time difference too. It's only 6 hours for another week and a half. I know you changed last weekend and we changed the end of this month. So welcome everyone to this Fika. I'm working from home like most Swedes are, and I find that Fika, taking a break from work, is perhaps even more important these days. To get a time to get inspired. And we are very excited to today have the Fika with the Swede Cecilia Widegren, who is a well-known person in this area and probably all over Sweden, but she's from this area and representing us in the Parliament, the federal government. And I have a couple of questions to ask Cecilia. And the first one is very open and broad. Who is Cecilia Widegren?
Thank you very much, Linnea, and thank you everybody over there. And god morgon, as we say, good morning, everyone, and thanks to the Swedish Historical Society too for inviting me this morning. And this is half an hour for you, so I will try to answer the questions short as I can, and of course give you time to reflect with me on issues that you have an interest in. My name is Cecilia Widegren, and I've been a member of the Swedish National Parliament, or federal as you call it, for 2 decades now, from the area of Skaraborg, where Lidköping and Rockford started its cooperation a long time ago, and now with all part of Skaraborg. That kind of a cooperation is very important for us, and we reach out both nationally, but of course globally. I represent the constituency of rural farmers, of course, that grow all crops, but we also have some of the most important frozen dishes of food that is produced in my constituency. We make actually most of the Volvo car engines in my constituency, and we have a lot of retail firm. It's a developed area from farming up to small and medium-sized enterprises. And representing that means that you have to reach global, because all those customers are not in this small, tiny country as I come from, we need to have our businesses globally. That's why you in Rockford are as interesting and important for us, to give you that as a starter. I live here on a horse ranch with my family. I'm married to a business leader and entrepreneur, and we have 2 sons, and one of them tried to be the next golf pro in the US, so we are working on that one after Henrik Stenson, who is now our top player in the US. Before I became a member in the national parliament, I was the governor here in west part of Sweden, so politics has been the major part of my life. I enjoy to be part of decision making and making priorities for the future for the people that I represent. I would like to say a few words why also interaction between the US and Sweden is important. I'm still wearing my class ring. Maybe you can see it there now. It's a Swedish Viking in the middle because I graduated from the Kingsburg school back in California. Some of the Swedes went around to the Great Lakes where you guys are, and some of them went to the West Coast. And I was one of the scholars that came to Kingsburg to study and stay there. And as you see, since I'm still wearing the ring, those years are still some of the most important years of my education. I'm very grateful for that. And since then, of course, my cooperation with the US have continued. 2 years ago, the Swedish Parliament unanimously, as you know, we have 8 national elected parties in the Parliament, unanimously appointed me as the president for their outgoing international cooperation. So I now represent Sweden, the Nordic countries, Europe, and also actually North America, Australia, and New Zealand within the UN as one of the members of Parliament. We are 15 that now are selected for the Security Council to be voices of the people from around the world. And that's why I can continue these days also represent with Americans and fellow citizens in your country. It's a very engaging, interesting project, of course, to do that. In these days, when we have a global crisis, not only the climate crisis, because these days you have to look at the climate crisis also on the one hand and the pandemic on the other hand. Of course, those kind of international cooperations are even more important, that people from around the world can discuss and try to act together now to actually secure that we get vaccine, not only in the rich part of the world, but also around the globe, to make sure that we get a healthy society the years to come. But there's a lot of ways to go to do so. So I've been a few times on the Hill, of course, to see my fellow partners over there at the State Department. I haven't been to Rockford, though. But Linnea will tell you later that my husband was on the last tour that went over a few years ago as a business leader. But I was invited of the governor of Indianapolis, so I was there a few years ago, visiting the local government. And I also, of course, since I'm a horse person, been to Kentucky and Chicago. So I've been in the surroundings. And I've seen a lot of the U.S. Since I lived over there for 3.5 years in a total. But I'll be back soon when the UN is opening up and we can have interaction together again physically on Avenue number 1. So over to you, Linnea.
Thank you, Cecilia. Wonderful. The second question is, you started a little bit about talking about it, but can you tell us more about your work? And I think, can you explain perhaps pre-COVID what a usual workday looks like for you?
Sure, thank you. I'd love to. As you see now, I sit in a very lush green background here, as Linnea does. Members of Parliament work from home. So I sit in my winter garden, and I'm sorry about the light here, but we, as you know, have half of the year we have darkness. And right now the spring is coming back, and with spring comes, of course, the birds back to the north part of Europe, but also the sunlight. So I love to sit out here, and I get a lot of light daytime. So that's why I'm sorry about that. You have me in such a light screen, but it's part of actually how it is back here. When we get the light out again, we are outside and trying to get as much light as possible to recover from the dark part of the year. We commute to Stockholm, where the National Parliament is, usually every week. So I've been doing so for 18 years before COVID. Why we do so every week is because it's very important in Swedish democracy that we actually do represent the people where we live. So I should maintain the majority of my time, sleeping time as it's called, actually in the Constitution, within my constituency. So people here know for sure that I represent them. I buy groceries in their grocery stores, and I buy my clothes down here and so forth, and go up to Stockholm and represent them. And I have a commuting time door to door for 3 hours with a speedy train in Sweden that we have modernized compared to the US about a couple of decades back. So we have speedy trains that are very nice in Sweden, and I try to use that as much as possible instead of flying or driving a car. Representing the constituency, as I told you before, is is a broad variety of questions. Since I'm coming both from an agriculture, entrepreneurial, industrial region, I have to be very wide in my questions and very open also to discussions and debates in nearly all kinds of issues. We also in my region, though, have a big part of the Swedish armed forces and the Swedish air fighters. And as you know, maybe Sweden is one of the few countries in the world that we produce our own air fighters. And they are, of course, NATO compatible. So we can, of course, cooperate a lot with NATO and the US as one of the golden partners. But being said so, I have been the chair of the Defense and Security Commission for Sweden for 7 years. So, of course, defense security issues among economic issues have been the dominating themes in my work for the government and for the national parliament. And that is also why, of course, I have been so many times over in the US. So I have been seeing some of your most technical and very interesting defense equipment that you have. Yes, very interesting. Yes, I've been on the big tanks and so forth. So I have for the US seen, for a Swedish citizen, seen a lot of the US defense. But of course also Sweden, as you know, is a huge welfare state. So any politician in Sweden or elected person has to be engaged in welfare issues. And for me, healthcare started very early as an interest, especially to modernize it in Sweden. Before it was only government run. And nowadays it's both government and run by entrepreneurs. And that has also been one of the issues that I've been working with for nearly 3 decades in Sweden, and seen that switch that we have had for the last 20 years now, which is very, very interesting. Sweden also celebrates this year 100 years of democracy. And 100 years actually since women in Sweden both could vote and enter national and local politics. Democracy as such is very important for Swedes. We have a very high rate of participation in our elections, which is every 4 years. It's between 85 to 90% that actually participates in elections in Sweden. And for us as being representatives, that is important also to continue to emphasize on. So we try to see as many young people as possible, both in schools and in organization and civil society and in their workplaces, to discuss democracy. Since every generation has to win its own democracy, it's very important to have that discussion and have it very lively to continue to be a very modern democracy where people really feel that they have a saying and that they can have a protest and that that their vote counts. Over to you, Linnea.
Very good. And the third question is if you have been to Rockford, and well, you mentioned it too, that you have not, but your husband has been, and a bit about that. So Krista Schellner, he came to Rockford in 2017 in the fall, together with a delegation with elected officials and business owners from Skaraborg, and several from Tidaholm, where I work now, was part of that delegation. And it was a great trip. And it just happens to be that earlier today, I had a business meeting with Krista. So it's like, last time I saw him was 3 years ago in the United States. And then today, as I'm speaking to you. So, but a great ambassador you both are for this area. And when you do visit Rockford, there are great golf courses. So you and your sons can take advantage of that. I know there are several people on this Zoom that can help you with that. So, question is also, do you have a Swedish quote that you can share with us? And then I would ask you to share it both in Swedish and in English, and perhaps also why you chose it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Linnea, for that. And to start with, no, I'm sorry about that, but as I told you, I've been in some of the surrounding anyways, and as you know, Chicago area is one of the hubs for the Swedish Scandinavian Airlines. So that is actually the first time I ever landed in the US. When I was 14, I landed in Chicago, and then I went down to Kingsburg, California. So that was that. And my husband had a great trip over there and saw a lot of important values for the work that Sweden and the US can do all together. So thank you for that. Very good. I saw a question in the chat here, so I think I also will start with that one. Yes, we have several political parties. And as I said, we are 8 national parties now. And to qualify as a national party, you have to have at least 4% out of the population vote in an election. So every 4 years, that could switch. We have been 6 parties when I have been sitting in the parliament, and we have been 8 parties. So it can differ. Right now, there are 2 smaller parties that have a tough time with the polls. So we'll see in 1.5 years how they're doing. But usually most parties, smaller ones, stretch out when it comes to election time, and they reach the goal of the 4%. So they continue to be national political parties. Every week, I work 24/7, like Linnea and Emma and Alex and other very bright ladies do, because that's what we do. I have no working time as a member of parliament, and I have no holidays on the paper either, so it's up to me really. But going up to Stockholm and being in the parliament, I'm usually Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the middle of the week. So I usually stay 2 nights in Stockholm, and then I can go back and stay with my family and work from home, and of course be out in my constituency. My constituency consists of 15 counties, and where Linnea right now works in one of those 15 counties. And of course, for me, as a member, I need to be out in all those 15, even I live in one. So I go around a lot in my constituency and try to see the people that I represent during Monday and Friday and Saturday. And hopefully then I have some time over for my family on Sunday, as you could see the schedule out of that. Okay, a very, very good quote could be mer samarbete mellan Sverige och USA, och speciellt då Skaraborg och Rockford. Kan väl vara ett bra quote. So more cooperation between the US and Sweden, especially Skaraborg and Rockford. I would like to put down as a quote and as a good theme for bringing this perspective all together.
I should add, we did not prepare that. That just came from you, just so people know. That sounded almost like I had sent you that. Very, very well. And Emma is on the Zoom too, who, for all of you to reach out to in terms of this moving forward. I want to mention too that our first Fika we had with Jennifer Ottosson in maybe January. She used to work in Falköping and Tidaholm and brought LEAX to Rockford area for potential expansion. And then last month we had Joakim Frykberg, CEO of Jula, who told us more about his business. And then next month on April 15th, we have Pascal Tischebanda, who is from Falköping and works in Katrineholm. And then we will have one in May that I'm still working on, try to secure. But we alternate a little bit, people who have been to Rockford, not been to Rockford yet. So, and you've been to Chicago Airport, which is hard to almost avoid, I would say. It's a great hub. And I see we have Karin Abercrombie, who is the honorary consul in Chicago on this Zoom too. Very nice to see you, and a good connection for everyone, of course, to connect with. We have a great collaboration between Rockford and Chicago, so it's great to see you on here, Karin. I think now we have a few more minutes if there are any more questions. It is 2:52 p.m. Judy here. So a little bit more time to go before it's evening, yes. But if you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box or raise your hand, and Alex will help us check on that. We usually,
to Judy, I can just say that you have your morning coffee, I have my afternoon coffee, and Swedes, as you know, we do Fika both in the morning and in the afternoon, and usually with cookies, but I have no cookies here, I have to admit that. So very Swedish to do it both ways, both in the morning and the afternoon. So the Fika time is perfect.
It is, and perhaps Cecilia could touch very lightly on the difference between the COVID strategy in the United States and Sweden. I know a question came in about that.
Of course, I'll do that. For a year now, we have struggled, as I said, globally with this pandemic, and country-wise, as you know, we look at this in a little bit of a difference. Here up in February last year, as you know, we cooperate a lot within the Nordic countries. That is Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland, 5 of us. And we are like a family, brothers and sisters. And we started to cooperate a lot, and we still do. But already in March last year, we started a little different strategy than our brothers and sisters, and I like to explain that a little bit so you get maybe a better understanding than what you have maybe heard or read. In Sweden, we are 10 million people about it. 40% out of that are living alone. They are lonely households, so to say. So even though we don't have a pandemic, we live separate, and people have space here. And are used to that. And even though you live maybe in an apartment in one of the big cities, it's very common that you have a house or a cottage outside town somewhere. You inherit it, you stay your free time there, summers and winters, and you're used to being out in the rural area too. That is very common in Sweden. So with having that, we tried from the beginning not to have restrictions that were mandatory, more that were voluntary. But we have gone from voluntary, and now to part some of the restrictions that we actually enforce, especially those are in the big supermarkets and so forth, and for concerts and so forth. But still, most of our restrictions are still voluntary, and we are asking people nicely, even though we do it a lot of time of the day and night to do it. And that is because the difference here and even to our brothers and sisters that live so close in this part of the world, is very different. We have a lot of space out here, and we use it and are used to use it a lot. I also got a question on the mental health, and I have to say, like in any country, I would assume right now that it's not going to the better yet, because people that living alone, even though it's not a pandemic, it's a tough time. And now when you have to, and you're asked to be even more alone, it is tough for people since we are social individuals. So we are looking a lot into that, and especially on young people. And some of our high school students have been home now for over a year, and those we work especially with and try to get them back a few hours or a few days a week separate from others. So we're working on that a lot. Sweden tried from the beginning, like the rest of Europe, to work with testing, distance, and trying to provide vaccine as soon as possible. And the vaccine right now, we work from the elderly down. And we started with the people that are 100, and we are now on a general level around 82, 83 in the ages where they have got vaccine. So I have a mother-in-law who has vaccine, but I have parents that haven't because they are a bit younger. But we are in that screen right now, and we are going to work our ways down. And there is no VIP line for anyone, which means a member of parliament or the president or so do not have vaccine in any other rating than because of age. So I'm going to wait a little bit longer, like Linnea, until summer or so, I guess.
Very good. Thank you, Cecilia. And we're about to wrap up here, but if you want to have more conversation about Sweden, and of course you do, you can go ahead and Google, I think would be perhaps the easiest, the Swedish Consulate of Chicago. And there is a session starting at 1 p.m. Rockford time, Chicago time today, where you can participate in another Zoom about that, or you can see in the chat box right now the email to register for. So thank you, Cecilia Widegren, so very much for taking the time to be our guest of honor in today's Fika with a Swede. And thank you everyone for taking the time to be with us. And if we don't see you before, we will see you on April 15th. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much.